That's up and running now, Chair.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I guess we shall crack on then. Thanks all for coming tonight. I feel like we're all quite well versed in these Zoom meetings now, so it's nice to see everyone, even if it is virtually. Do we have any apologies of absence? I know Councillor Shears said she'll be unable to attend because she's on holiday, but is anyone aware of anything else? No? It's quite a quiet little meeting tonight then. Any declarations of interest? No, all good. You're a good committee to work with. I like it. And then we'll move on to the minutes, which I will just quickly mention. I know people did want to see the information from the subcommittee on the 9th of April 2019, which I believe Hannah circulated a briefing about, but the minutes all agreed. Brilliant. We shall move on then. Any matters arising, not that I'm aware of. Okay, so we will move on to the committee work. Oh no, we've got written questions and petitions, which I do understand. I have had a question from the public, which I do not think he's not come along, has he, Hannah?
No, I'll share my screen and read out the question, Chair, if that's okay.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you. So, question from Mr. David Stockbridge. Can you hear me still?
Yep.
Thank you. Were the roof signs being issued and enforced on the 21st of November 2018 authorised by the Harlow Licensing Committee?
And I will read out the answer, so we've got it on record, basically. On the 11th of September 2018, the Licensing Committee recommended to full council that the private hire vehicle licensing conditions were amended to require private hire vehicles to display roof signs. This was ratified by full council on the 20th of September 2018. The specification for roof signs displayed on private hire vehicles was delegated to the Licensing and Environment Manager in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Licensing Committee and was approved on the 2nd of October 2018. Therefore, the requirement for and design of roof signs was approved in accordance with the Council's decision-making process and any legal requirements. So there we go. And I don't believe, obviously, there's not a supplement because Mr. David is not here. So we shall move on to the committee work plan then. I will say quickly before this, I know in light of the recent Department for Transport guidance on private hire vehicles, there may be some slight adjustments on the work plan. I don't know if Chris wanted to go a little bit more into detail about that, but if we are all happy with the work plan, obviously he can move on and kind of.
Yeah, I'm happy just to say a few words. Councillor Jezzard. So the Department for Transport at the end of July have published a new set of standards, and it's called Taxi and Private Hire Vehicle Standards. It's not new legislation, but it is standards that we must have regard to. So these have actually been, a number of years in the coming. But they say, like I say, they've come out at the end of July. So what we're doing within the team is working through the new standards to identify where we already meet the required standards. So, for example, it talks about enhanced Dbs checks and checks on barring lists, which we already do. It talks about things like safeguarding training, which again, we already do. It talks about in terms of conviction policy and convictions guidelines, as we will recall, a year ago we adopted the Institute of Licensing guidelines in relation to convictions, and again these new standards have incorporated those conviction guidelines. So again, we've already done that, but there are other areas where we are going to need to review our procedure and policy. Some of the items identified we were already working towards, and an example of that is a national anti-fraud database called NR3. It was a voluntary database, but local authorities can sign up to, and it's a database of drivers that have been refused or revoked a license. And in essence, the idea is to stop drivers then moving between authorities, different authorities, if they had been refused or revoked by one authority. So we'd already decided to move towards that, and we're working on that currently, but that's in the new standards. Over and above that, there are items in the standards that we don't currently do, which are new. One of the examples is in relation to Dbs checks. So we check, obviously, enhanced DBSs every time we renew on a 3-year license. Under the new standards, it's going to require us to do DBS checks every 6 months, regardless of license expiry dates. So that will also mean then making sure drivers join the update service. So that's going to be new to us. And that isn't the only example of where we're going to need to change our policy and procedure. So obviously, this wasn't expected at the end of July. So we are, working through it. And it will have then potentially an impact on the work plan for this year. We may need to move things around to accommodate updated procedure and policy. So, for example, I noticed that for November committee, we spoke about reviewing the general enforcement policy. It looks as though under the new standards, we're going to need to have an overarching policy that will encompass all of the policies brought together. So there's no point us spending the licensing authority time on reviewing the policy when we need to do a wider review to meet the new standards. So it was just really to bring that to your attention at this meeting, and to say that we will need to rejig the work plan accordingly. Has anyone got any questions on that? Sorry.
Brilliant.
Councillor
Garnett.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether we could tie that into that licensing general enforcement policy. Regularly on the news now, we're getting problems with licensed premises under the COVID-19 regulations. Is there anything we can have, I don't know whether you do it here or subcommittee, that we can have a briefing on that as to what powers you have? Because I'm a little bit lost as to what you can and cannot do, where the police come into it, where you come into it, and it might be a good idea.
Michael, would you want to respond on that?
So thank you, Chair. I think it would be helpful to try and explain some of that. I won't attempt to do it here, but it is actually quite complex. And I was going to suggest actually that we use the slot that's reserved on 17th November for review of general enforcement policy to introduce the new guidance and perhaps give an overview of where we comply and where we don't need to do work, and where there is a sort of new work stream, and sort of set out something of an action plan to kind of sketch out, when the changes are going to come, so that by the time we finish that action plan, we're compliant. And I think that will be helpful in dealing with the Department for Transport, who, to be honest, have spent a long time with this guidance, and they probably want us to implement it, with some speed. So that will be helpful. I mean, possibly subject to members' views, we could circulate an overview of the relationship between Licensing Act powers and COVID-19 powers to the committee, so that you can see how that works really. Broadly, actually, the COVID legislation is separate and new, and it isn't part of the licensing regime. At the moment, the licensing regime has its 4 licensing objectives, and public health isn't one of them. But obviously, we're trying to make sure that, as far as practical, when we deal with licensed premises, we have a sort of seamless approach to it and use the most appropriate power. But we'd be happy to sort of circulate a note so that things are a little clearer, if that would be helpful. Chair.
Wonderful, that'd be nice.
That
Thank
would
you,
be
Chair.
really useful. Thank you, Michael. I understand Councillor Churchill had a question, if you'd like to unmute.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Pleased to hear that. I know that I've actually asked for a bit of an update on the situation in Old Harlow under any other business. So I'll just take the quick opportunity, as Michael has brought up some of this COVID situation here, to just ask the question of the committee and the chair whether we can actually look at a zero tolerance approach as we have with underage drinking, which did prove to be quite useful to bring that in. I know Michael was saying about the 4 licensing objectives. I would suggest that objective 1, which is prevention of crime and disorder, under COVID, of course, if someone breaches COVID regulations or rules, that is a crime. So that could be where it could sit. It's just a suggestion, throwing that one in. You know, sort of. So I think that there may be places for COVID to sit within the licensing legislation. Obviously, we need to look at that, or I should say, officers need to look at that, and bring something back to members in November, as you say. But a briefing would be very, very helpful, I think, to the committee prior to that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Churchill. That's quite useful. I'll take Michael, then I'll take Councillor Holcoop. It's okay.
I was just going to say that crime and disorder is a licensing objective, but the police are the responsible authority with regard to crime and disorder. So it does get complicated, and we'll try and sort that out in our briefing. But you know, the licensing authority isn't itself the responsible authority for crime and disorder. So, and further point is that the COVID guidance is guidance, and breaching the guidance isn't in itself an offence, which, well, is the way that the government have chosen to approach it, and they have given powers to the public health authority, which in this case is the county council, to deal with breaches. So we've got a sort of multi-layered approach that we have to adopt. But I will try and clarify all that in the guidance, and hopefully that will kind of help councillors decide what approach they want to take.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michael. Councillor Holcoop.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to raise in under the item 7, the health and safety situation on both the Checkers overcrowding under COVID and the small copper drugs arrests under this situation. But I wondered if it was appropriate to bring it to the committee tonight, because wondering if it would be going to a licensing subcommittee, in which case it wouldn't be a good idea to go through anything on it tonight because of that licensing subcommittee. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Who would be the best person to probably advise on that? I think if it is something that we could bring up in matters of urgent business, if it's not anything, you know, that's not already kind of public knowledge, then that should be fine to discuss briefly, but someone else might be able to clarify a bit better. Okay, I guess we'll move on then maybe. Should we move on to, oh, are we all agreed with the work plan? If that's kind of speculated, everyone's all good. Perfect. Getting away with myself. So if we'll move on to item 7, which is the Harlow Council Health and Safety Service Plan. There is obviously the recommendation that we approve it as attached to Appendix A of the report. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the health and safety plan? Yes, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. And because I haven't seen this before, because I've not been on licensing for quite some time, I've gone through it in quite a fine-tooth comb. So I've got 3 questions / queries that could end up being comments depending on what the answers are. I think they're all mistakes in the document, but if I can take you through them in order. The first one I've got, which is on page 12 of the agenda or page 6 of the document, in the first paragraph there, it says Harlow Council's statement of intent focuses on the council's priority aims and objectives and represents the council's top level policy document outside of the 2020 vision. The 2020 vision in this council hasn't been around for about 12 years, I think. So I'm not sure why that's being referenced there. Chair, would you like me to take all of the questions in one go or wait for an answer? Okay. The next one is on page 16 or page 10 of the document. And both under health and safety investigations and accident investigations, the dates that are quoted there with the investigations carried out are both 1718, when we've had 1819 and 1920. Now, I understand the most recent data may not be available, but it seems strange that we're quoting data from 3.5 years ago. So I wonder if the officers can update if there's a more updated version, and indeed what the trend line is on those over the last few years. And the final query is on page 27 or page 21, depending on which reference you're using. And it's the title of 6.2.0, Areas for Improvement and Planned Works in 1819 to 1920. The document in Appendix A there clearly talks about 2021 to 21-22, and I think that's just a typo in the title of the 6.2.0. Thanks, Chair.
And thank you, Councillor Johnson. Michael, if you're able to go through them questions, that would be brilliant. Comments, questions.
Yes, I will cough to a few of those on behalf of officers. Apologies, there are some typographical errors in there. In defence of the people who put together the report, I'd say that they've been doing that in the midst of an unprecedented workload, and there are mistakes in there. Yeah, it shouldn't refer to 1819. All of those dates should be current or previous year. And similarly with 2020 vision, actually, I think, this is a work plan that has a sort of standing format that derives from the guidance that we're being given, and so it is in effect amendment of the previous work plan. And we've been caught, we've made mistakes in not editing things out. I think we just read what we intend to see. So I think it is useful to have a fresh pair of eyes on it and get those corrections, and we'd be happy to have those amended in time for full approval, subject to councillors' approval.
Johnson again.
Chair, can I just ask the middle question that I had about where the health and safety figures and the accident figures say 1718, does that mean that they are actually 1920 or 2020? I assume 1920 is the most up to date, and it's just been mislabeled, but that's the most up to date data. And then also, Chair, can I just say, it wasn't a criticism, it was just spotting the things that I spotted. The rest of the document's actually really good, and there's obviously a lot of work gone into it. So thanks from me, and please don't take me spotting those errors as criticism of the overall report.
I do agree, it's always good to have a fresh pair of eyes. Michael, if you just wanted to clarify that, the second point.
Well, I may get caught out on, obviously I'm fronting this, but I don't do that work currently. My understanding is those figures would be the last complete year, and you did ask about trends, and actually we can go back to previous years and do a note on how that has changed over, say, 3 years, if that would be helpful.
I've unmute myself, brilliant, thank you. Councillor Holcoop.
Oh, thank you, Chair. On page 27 or 21, whichever way you look at it, the last, in January 26, the environmental health situation, the last part of that says the uniform system still requires, you go to the next page and it's not there. I thought it was going a bit loopy when I saw it. So there's still some part of that sentence that has not been finished off on the next page. So I don't quite know what happened with that.
Yeah, I assume that would be similar to the before, but Michael, you might be able to clarify.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still looking for the reference. That's page 21.
21 or 27, if you look at the side number, it's that last part. Okay. In January 26, it starts it off. Yeah. And it's the last sentence that doesn't finish off.
I suspect it may have been just cut off due to some quirk of the formatting that the word processor defeated us, but I will just have a look at that.
Okay, thank you. But overall, I think it's an extremely good report. But of course, this year, COVID has been a major part of the year. So financially and in every other respect, things are going to look a bit different when we come out of it eventually, as to how we're looking at this whole document, isn't it? Because of what we've done with it and the officer involvement, the time and the magnificent job they've done with this situation, and how it reflects on the way forward with respect with the recovery panel side, because that's the other side of this that's going forward in amongst all of this situation. So I think they've done a very good job at this stage before we know the final outcome, when we ever get there. Thanks, Chair.
Definitely, thank you, Councillor Hoggoop. I agree. Are there any more questions or comments on this report? Are we happy to approve it, and with all the changes and typo amendments and such? And then I'll move on to the next agenda item. Yeah, is that agreed? Perfect. Thank you. It's so weird to try and figure out what's the best way to do a show of hands on this.
Chair, I think you've muted yourself.
Sorry. What was the last thing you caught? I can't remember.
I think you probably just started on the new item.
Oh, okay. That's fine. Sorry. Gosh, you'd think I would be decent with this technology stuff, but anyway. So we'll move on to the fees and charges review, which is obviously part of the work plan. And this is obviously on the the tariffs and fares that the public pay. So the report relates to that, but I do believe that the officers discussed it wasn't necessary to increase licensing fees in line with inflation this year, so they'll remain the same as last year. I don't know if anyone's better to clarify on that, but if anyone's got any questions or comments on the fees and charges review, obviously we can take them. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. And again, forgive me, it may be that this gets asked every year or in previous years and I've just not been around for it. Why does the council actually get involved in the setting of the Hackney carriage tariffs? Is it under legislation that we need to do that, or is it just that we are involved?
Michael, if you're best.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it is a question that has come up before. There is a power to regulate, and there isn't an obligation. However, it is a power that the council has chosen to exercise since well before my time. And I think council has said, well, is it a power that we can then resolve not to use anymore? And I think the view was that that was very complicated. And the view that committees have taken under a number of chairs really during my tenure is that probably the best way to resolve that is to, unless the trade make proposals that seem to councillors outrageous, to allow them to propose when they want to change the tariff, and to trust them to know their business best. And I suppose in very simple terms, if the council sort of unreasonably suppressed the tariff, then probably the trade would simply become private hire drivers, and the council can't regulate that. And if the council sort of approved a maximum fare that was excessive from the view of the trade, then if they charge that, they'd probably go out of business. So we have continued to sort of liaise with the trade, and this is their proposal for the tariffs that they want, and officers think that it's reasonable, and it is 6 years since the tariffs have been increased, so we don't have any objection. Okay.
Thank you, Michael. I'll take another question from Councillor Johnson, and then
Can I just say thank you, Michael? That's a really helpful answer to me. And in which case, Chair, I have no issue with what the trade are asking for, and don't see any reason to get involved in that other than to say I'd be happy.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Holcoop, you had a question?
Just to say that I know that because I've been using ABC and Hackney recently just to see how they're doing, and they are struggling because of the situation they're under. And it's really reassuring that they are the ones that are saying that they can handle this sort of cost. They don't want to go above it, because if that's their decision and we're backing them, that means that although they're struggling, they are recognising the public situation, but they are very happy with the tariffs that are being charged. So that's very reassuring to me because of the situation they're in. Thank you, Chair.
Definitely. Thank you, whole group. I definitely agree. That is a good thing. Are we happy to recommend this to Cabinet then, and say to adopt if everyone's agreed on that? Yep, brilliant. Okay, perfect.
Chair, I think you've muted yourself again.
What's wrong with me? Why do I keep doing that? Well, I don't believe there are references from any other committees, so we'll move on to matters of urgent business, which I believe Councillor Churchill had wanted an update provided about the situation at the Checkers. If you wanted to say a few words about that, and then we can get a response.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, as this is a public meeting, I need to be careful about any questions I'm asking. I do not want officers to give anything away that could be of detriment to any case that's being dealt with at the moment. I think really it's just a case of some reassurance to members and the public, for that matter, that this authority, licensing authority, and the police are taking this sort of situation, this breaching. I mean, we've all seen the video, and on the face of it, the breaching of the COVID regulations and breaches of licensing, you know, of the licensing of the license, beg your pardon, of the premises by this. These people, it's unacceptable, I think, in this day and age, and so I think we're just looking for some reassurance that it's not being ignored. Action is possibly on the way. Obviously, it's all down to evidence that's placed in front of a subcommittee. The subcommittee is called, and we can't prejudge anything. So I just need to be careful, but I think, you know, we just need some sort of brief update from officers without sort of showing their hand too much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Churchill. Michael, you're probably the best person to offer a response on this.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do my best to comply with the brief of saying something without saying too much. Yeah, I mean, certainly the council is aware of concerns raised by members of the public, and it's putting what resources are available into investigating concerns that have been brought to it. In a hypothetical situation where a pub or club that was licensed for sale of alcohol and music and dancing was offering music and dancing, that would be an offence, and that has been brought very clearly to the attention of any licensees where it has come to the council, that come to the attention of the council there's a concern they're not complying with that requirement. So music and dancing is still one of the things that is banned from the early days of COVID-19 restrictions, and that hasn't been lifted. Pubs and clubs can sell alcohol. They are expected to comply with guidance from government, and County Council, as the public health authority, have enforcement powers. And if there were a case where Harlow Council was concerned that COVID guidelines were not being complied with, then it would bring those concerns to the attention of the management, so that is on record, has the option of serving a community protection warning notice, which makes it clear what the council's concern is, and in agreement with the county council, that would be a trigger for the county council to write to the management and say, if you don't comply with the requirements, we will consider our powers to close you down under COVID regulations. So it would be something of a joint act between Harlow Council and County Council in relation to COVID powers, and not actually a licensing matter, which hopefully I'll be able to make clear in the note that I've promised. There may be related things in any licensed premises that might fall within the licensing powers, and if a responsible authority triggers a review, obviously the licensing be very happy to support that review and try to make sure that all parties' concerns are properly represented there. Further, in relation to particular premises, I understand that there is a concern about a structure that's been built there, and I think I can say that very firm advice in relation to what can be done under planning law has been given to the people concerned, because my understanding is that you wouldn't actually lawfully be able to build a structure like that in a circumstance like that. And I know that's been a concern to residents, and I hope to see that sort of, regularised under planning law. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Michael. Councillor Churchill, did you have any further questions, or has that kind of satisfied your? Brilliant. Okay, I think that is all good. Thank you for answering. Thank you all for coming. Sorry I'm so dark. I don't know why. I've got an eco bulb. It makes my living room look like very incredibly dark. So next time I will be in a different room. But yeah, I think that's everything. So thank you all. And
Thank you, Chair.
I will see you soon, virtually, I'm sure.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Lovely
Bye.
to see you all. Bye.